Through the roller coaster of an Arizona Cardinals season, we just hit a low point again. But don't worry, I'm pretty confident they're going to get back up, and I'm going to tell you why. It's another edition of Southwest Bias.
Get that stuff out of here. It's Southwest Bias.
Brought to you by Branded Bills. Of course, elevate your brand like I am right now. With Branded Bills, the perfect headwear and apparel, use code PHNX for 20% off your first order. We're switching things up a little bit. How about some baseball talk for Derek Montilla?
Absolutely. Let's get in on it.
I'm throwing a changeup out here. I'm not taking those PHNX Cardinals guys. They're already giving you too much Cardinals coverage right here on PHNX Sports, which you're already subscribed to, of course. So I'm tapping in with Cardinals fan, but our D-backs reporter, of course, that is Derek Montilla.
Those guys haven't won a fantasy football championship in the PHNX
that is
league.
True.
Am I right?
So would you say that you are more of a football expert than the PHNX Cardinals?
I would just say that I have the resume essentially to be here today. I don't know if they do. I said check the stats. The numbers don't lie. That's something we do over there at the D-backs.
Well, another number that doesn't lie is that technically speaking, the Arizona Cardinals are still first place in the NFC West after a disappointing loss to the Seahawks. Of course, they are now tied with the Seahawks, who have the tiebreaker. They are atop the NFC West, technically in first. Both teams at 6-5, and it feels like, Derek, the overarching story with the Cardinals week in and week out is if it's a loss, the season is over. If it's a win, this is the most dangerous team that could sneak into the playoffs. It's all the highs and the lows.
You know, I think that the Cardinals are overcoming a lot when it comes to like their personnel, right? And I think that they have some great stars, but it's the other personnel that's what helps you win games, right? The offensive linemen, the defense, everything like that. So, I mean, I still think that this Cardinals team can be dangerous, but you would have to argue that with the way the roster is constructed this year, they're kind of ahead of schedule. And I mean, that's the one thing that even after a loss to Seattle that game sucked. I mean, it sucked for both teams. I just didn't think it was a very good. I'm not convinced that the Cardinals are a worse team than Seattle after that loss.
It was a classic game in Seattle. Every time the Cardinals and the Seahawks play in Seattle, it's just so weird.
Yeah, it's weird. There's a lot of mistakes made. I mean, Kyler made some huge mistakes in this one, and that's something that I think that he had. We haven't really seen that from him this year, where he has, kind of panicked. It feels like he's matured a bit, and he's gotten to a point where he's willing to not make those interception throws and things like that. Just those moments where he kind of panics and tries to make a play when you should just eat the ball.
I mean, I'm willing to give Kyler Murray the benefit of the doubt. I mean, this was his worst game of the season so far. He's had so many high points. He's definitely shown that he's matured. He's shown that he has an all-around, kind of matured game now, and especially not just relying on his legs and his athleticism. Like, he's staying in the pocket, he's delivering really nice balls, and there was still a couple of those this game, just mistakes that outweighed it. But that's the thing is this is a low point. This is a point where you say, okay, Kyler Murray played bad. The whole team basically played bad. You put up 6 points. You only allowed 16, but to a Seattle team that wasn't really getting a lot of momentum. And now you're sitting here like, okay, we lost and we're tied for first in the NFC West at 6-5. Of course, you're benefiting from a weaker division, but what I'm saying is, okay, we've seen Kyler Murray hit these heights. I mean, we are a bye week and a game removed from the Jets game where the Cardinals absolutely dominated them 31-6. And Kyler was putting that thing on a rope every single time that he was throwing it. So I choose to believe that even if he's not all the way in that Jets category, he's more towards that end than he is the Seattle category. And as we've shown and as we've seen in the NFL, if you have an elite quarterback, Derek, you're in contention if you make it into the playoffs. I think that's reason number one why you cannot be out on the Arizona Cardinals after just a loss after a bye week.
Right. Seeing how they played in that Jets game is definitely the main reason why. And considering that they are in this dumpster fire that is the NFC West right now, they have a chance. Every team has a chance. There's no team that's out of it. No team is playing significantly well. The Rams have looked much better than their record indicates at times, but they still are at 5-6. 49ers, without Purdy, seem to be a fairly harmless offense that couldn't get that much done even with McCaffrey. So at this point you do have to still feel very good about the Cardinals' chances. And again, they still have another game against the Seahawks at home, which despite the fact the Seahawks are 3-1 on the road this season, you still feel pretty good about that. And again, how that could swing things in the Cardinals' favor. You also are right about Kyler Murray. Like, when I bring up the mistakes he made, I felt like that was what made the difference in this game, right? If Kyler Murray doesn't make those mistakes, the Cardinals might go on to win this game, considering how close it was still with those huge mistakes that were made.
Absolutely. And you have seen Kyler be the type of person who is not making those mistakes on a game-to-game basis. Right. But of course, again, nobody is perfect. And every time that you walk into Seattle, anything is on the table. And you mentioned kind of, overachieving for this roster so far. Even in this loss, you still only allow 16 points to the Seahawks. Right. I mean, this defense is performing way above what the talent level would demand, especially because, you didn't make a massive trade. I know you made a trade, but not a massive trade at the trade deadline. You didn't fill your roster with a bunch of shots in free agency. I mean, this is a defense that people have been screaming for and had been screaming for. Hey, they need more talent. They need reinforcements. Right. They just don't have enough. Right. Well, if you look at the last couple of weeks, 16 points allowed to Seattle, 6 points allowed to the Jets, 9 points allowed to the Bears. Then you go 27 to the Dolphins, back down to 15 against the Chargers. The last time that you really got a number put on your defense was when you're in Green Bay at Lambeau when they put up 34 on you. And that game was just out of reach basically from the first quarter, right? Before that, like Washington is the only other team that put up a ton of points against you. And that's something where going into the season, we expected the offense to be electric and we expected the defense to be anti-electric. The other team was electric. And if anything, it's kind of both have not exactly met those expectations. I still think the Arizona Cardinals have another level on offense they need to hit as far as involving Marvin Harrison Jr. along with Trey McBride at the same time. And then, of course, on defense, they've overachieved where I think they're holding defenses a little bit low, or they're holding offenses to just less points and less production than you would expect. To me, I'm still confident that over the last couple of weeks of the season, especially because you're going to hit a pretty easy stretch there at a certain point, I feel like this offense is going to get its legs back under them, and especially Kyler Murray. And if you enter the playoffs with a feisty, overperforming defense and an offense who finally gets it all clicking together at the same time, I don't think that there's any team that would want to see the Arizona Cardinals in the playoffs in that given scenario.
Well, I agree with that, but I also think at the same time, there's a reason why they didn't go out and make these big moves to make this team much better this year, right? Like you don't really want to mortgage your future when you're in the hole. The Cardinals kind of are in talent-wise. Yeah, they're in a great position as far as the cap and everything next season. So they're going to have a lot of money to spend. But I do think that of course they do have an overachieving group of guys right now that they can kind of let things play out. Mm-hmm. I don't know, when you do look at that loss to Green Bay and some of the other games, I don't know if they're in the same, kind of atmosphere as some of those other teams.
No,
right?
They're not a top tier playoff team.
But it's football, right? I cover baseball. Yeah. The reason why the series thing happens in all these other sports is typically that allows for the better team to come out on top, even if you run into a hot team that's an underdog. In football, anything can happen, and you can get hot at the right time, and you can come together at the right time. And even though the Cardinals don't have the strongest group of guys talent-wise, it doesn't mean that those guys can't go out and perform on Sunday. And honestly, with the way that this division is, go out there, win the NFC West, and much like this Diamondbacks team I cover, let those chips fall where they may in the playoffs, because you never know what can happen as long as you can get there.
Well, I mean, even just me laying it out as far as best case scenario, Cardinals making it into the playoffs, it's by no means the expectations for them to compete in the playoffs. And I think that in itself is a testament to this team, to the front office, to the coaching staff, as far as we are having a conversation right now with a roster and a payroll that should not be in the conversation of saying like, hey, you have an opportunity to enter the playoffs, and you have the opportunity to enter the playoffs as a dangerous team. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, there is a massive, massive game this weekend, probably your hardest game left in the season. And we're going to discuss that right after I remind everybody that this episode of Southwest Bias is brought to you by Branded Bills. Like I mentioned, I am wearing my Branded Bills hat right now, and I'm usually wearing a Branded Bills hat almost every single day simply because they're so comfortable, the performance, the style, they're so awesome, and they have everything: snapbacks, truckers, fitted, beanies, and tees. Branded Bills has you covered with performance and style. Plus, they partner with great schools and great athletic programs like the Arizona State Sun Devils, and then they do charity work for the lesser athletic programs and schools Tucson like the Tech. University of Arizona. Exactly.
Whatever you want to call them.
Whatever you want to call them. They're a local company out of Mesa, Arizona, and you can get 20% off your first order. All you have to do is head to brandedbills.com, use code PHNX, and once again, get 20% off your first order. And of course, our friends at Empire Today, we appreciate them for also sponsoring Southwest Bias. If you are remodeling a home, remodeling an apartment complex, maybe you're a landlord, maybe you are trying to spruce up your small business, right?
Absolutely.
Empire Today, they are here to help you get the right floors at the right price in the right time frame. And when I say right price, I'm not going to go out here and guarantee you by far and away the lowest price, because in that business, anybody who does that is installing floors in your home that they wouldn't put in their own. They're cutting corners. They're going to put a floor in your home that in 2 years is not going to hold up.
Well, I'll tell you this. I've been overwhelmed with choices because I'm like that. I get overwhelmed easily. And the thing about Empire Today is you can bring them exactly what kind of flooring you're looking for, and they bring you a curated product selection so you don't have to sit there and waste time looking through a sample book this big with thousands of samples in it.
Easy, quick, and convenient are 3 easy, quick, and convenient words to describe Empire Today. And even though they will not guarantee you the lowest price, they're going to give you some money off just for listening to Southwest Bias. So schedule a free in-home estimate today. All listeners can receive a $350 off discount when they use promo code PHNX. Some restrictions do apply. See EmpireToday.com/PHNX for details. Playoff talk is all good and well, Derek, but you have to actually get there first.
Correct.
And standing in the way of the Arizona Cardinals right now this week to stop them from going to 500 on the season, which would be a pretty significant blow to momentum, are the Minnesota Vikings. And this could be the toughest game that you have the rest of the season. 9-2 overall, 4-1 at home. And of course,
frauds.
You are on the road taking on the Minnesota Vikings. Derek, do the Cardinals have the horses to pull this off?
I'm doubtful. I'm doubtful of it. And the reason why is because the Vikings defense has been fairly good all season long and hasn't been great lately. They've had some cracks in it, but at home, this Vikings team just has too much to play for and trying to keep up with the Lions in their division. And, you know, again, I don't know what's going to happen with this whole quarterback situation for them, but Sam Darnold has been playing at least decent lately. And I mean, they've been getting some good production offensively. So I think it's going to come down to the Cardinals defense and how well their defense plays. I think that the offense will rebound from the mistakes they made last week. And I think we'll see them put some points up against the Vikings. It's just how much can they contain the Vikings, and especially the way that their wide receivers are playing right now.
Yeah, to me, there are no moral victories on Sunday. You can play tough. You can play good against a 9-2 team. You can compete and still be considered a good team. But you are at the point right now where you need to make up some ground after a loss to Seattle. And of course, you do have 3 NFC West games going forward. And then you do have a stretch of playing the Panthers and playing the Patriots. And you should be expected to stack wins there. But in order to really put yourself in a more comfortable position and kind of reestablish your momentum, reestablish your fight in this playoff race, you got to avoid hitting 500. And that means beating a team that is better than you. But that's something that the Arizona Cardinals have shown that they can at least compete in those games for sure.
Absolutely.
I mean, you look back to week 1 of the season, Buffalo Bills on the road. You are competing, right? You look against the Detroit Lions at home. I mean, you're a couple really interesting calls away from winning that game against Detroit. Those are 2 really good teams and 2 really close games that could have been decided by a play or 2. You need to win on the margins. You need to win that type of game against Minnesota in order to make it more comfortable. Is it impossible to make the playoffs after that? Absolutely not. But you need Kyler Murray to play and bounce back from the game that he had before. You need your secondary to step up as well. And right now, Jalen Thompson is questionable. Hopefully you get the debut of Darius Robinson, the first-round rookie. You've been patiently waiting for him. He's also listed as questionable. So if you're able to get those 2 players to reinforce your defense, Kyler Murray doesn't make mistakes, and we can maybe get a Marvin Harrison Jr. sighting here and there. I mean, that's the recipe to compete against good teams. That's the recipe to upset a good team on the road in a difficult place to play.
I had a chance to be there the night that both of those gentlemen threw out the first pitch of the Diamondbacks game. So I got to kind of actually play catch with Marvin Harrison Jr. As well as Robinson. I really loved him. I loved his attitude. I've been waiting for him to make his, kind of his debut, his on-field presence known. I know he's struggled and he's gone through a lot this season. So it's tough for that young man, and hopefully we get to see him on field. But yeah, like you said, the secondary is very important in this game. I think my attitude about the Cardinals' chances, should they make the playoffs, would change with a win against the Minnesota Vikings. Again, it's a big game, and it's easy to write the Cardinals off, but I mean, they have hung with those teams. I think the most disappointing loss is probably last week's loss, because you don't feel like the Seahawks played very well. You just felt like the Cardinals shot themselves in the foot, and that
definitely.
And of course there were a couple of calls that didn't go their way. There's a couple of things that obviously you could discuss there, but most importantly, the mistakes killed them, and they can't let that happen against this Vikings team. They also have to play their best defense, especially against. Was it Jordan Addison and Jefferson?
Jefferson, yeah. Well, the Cardinals roller coaster will continue. Hopefully it goes back up to a high point. And if maybe you want some more in-depth football talk, did we not cut it for you? Ungrateful. Well, you can check out PHNX Cardinals. Nobody's covering the Arizona Cardinals like they are. That's Bo Brock, Johnny Venerable, Damon Doug, and their cast of characters, Craig Morgan, as well. Of course, they're live 5 days a week, including having a pregame, halftime, and postgame show for you on Sunday, 11 o'clock to kick off against the Vikings. And if you don't know what PHNX Sports is, you can subscribe to this channel right here. We cover every single Arizona sports team, and we do it unlike any other entity in the Valley, whether you need Sun Devils coverage as they attempt to make the Big 12 championship, Phoenix Suns coverage as they are also in the middle of their season, Diamondbacks coverage as they're in the middle of the offseason, and the Dodgers, the most evil franchise in the history of sports, period.
I don't even want to cover baseball anymore, so that's why I'm here doing football.
That's why we're here doing football. Appreciate all of you. Make sure you leave a comment. What do you think about the Arizona Cardinals? Subscribe if you're listening on audio, rate 5 stars, and review. We'll be back later this week for another edition of Southwest Bias.
Get that stuff out of here. It's Southwest Bias.
We all silly like the mayor.